which will be open to the whole community. And then we'll be having some detailed, in-depth facilitated discussions with a randomly selected group of Orvilleans. And this process will be facilitated by myself, by Helen, who's sitting back there from the facilitator pool, who's actually facilitated participatory budgeting processes before in other spaces, and Avinash, who worked on the report with me. So I'm just going to run you through the outline of this process. So the first session is today. We are here right now, Unity Pavilion, introduction to the process and presentation of the annual report. Then next Tuesday, the more detailed Q&A session, as I mentioned, to learn more about the various sectors that the BCC supports. And both of these events are open to the full community. This will be followed by a couple of facilitated sessions with the randomly selected group. And in these in-depth sessions, we're going to focus on those key questions. So in the first session, we'll focus on those priority areas for community funding and how this is to be reflected in our budgetary allocations. And in the second session, we'll focus on the two questions of key missing services or services that ought to get more support, as well as where should funds come from to support this. And then we'll take all of this and circle it back to the community at large. So, of course, all of this timeline is going to be a little bit subject to the COVID restrictions, so I'm very much crossing my fingers and hoping that everything will continue to work out. So on Tuesday, February 1st, we're hoping to present back the outcomes of the facilitated processes with the wider community. And following that, we're going to launch a survey which will ask the same questions to all community members. Now, we very much hope that this is going to be an iterative process. So we're hoping that people are coming here to this presentation, coming to the Q&A, coming to the presentation back and seeing, hey, when a core group of people got together and looked at this for several hours, what did they come up with? And to inform, you know, when you participate in the survey, to inform, build on all of that. So in the survey, we'll likely ask you, hey, these were the outcomes from the facilitated discussions. How much do you agree with this? And are there any changes that you would still want to make at this stage? You can go back. Thanks. We'll take that back and we'll look at the survey results and then we'll compile them against the results that we received after the facilitated sessions, as well as the next steps that we propose as BCC, having all of those results with us. So why should any of you participate in this process? I know when I speak to people about BCC, about budgets, a lot of people feel intimidated. They feel like I'm not a numbers person. They don't know what they have to offer to such a process. So why should any of you participate? Well, first of all, this process is really intended to be educational. It's an opportunity to deepen your understanding of our community's budgeting process and also of the services that it supports. Then this process is also intended to create shared understanding, which I think is really important for all of us here in this community, by providing a space for all Orvilleans to interact with other community members on our needs and priorities as a community, and to inform BCC's budgeting process as a result. And finally, this process is in service of the development of Orville to inform how the budget can be allocated to best support Orville's aspirations and needs. So some of you might ask, why is there a randomly selected group? Why aren't all of the sessions just simply open to everyone? So first of all, we can only really provide quality facilitation for a set and committed group, realistically of under 30 participants. So we decided to draw up to 30 people at random from the master list for these facilitated sessions, because we really wanted to get feedback from a wide range of community members, rather than just having people chosen to represent various sectors, which is often how it's been done in the past. And we're really hoping that this is going to enable us to gain a deeper understanding of how the budget actually impacts the wider community and what changes might be needed going forward. So what will be the outcome of this process? We're going to use the outcomes to inform the upcoming city services budget. It's really important to note that if any really major major changes are requested out of this process, these are going to be phased in over a longer period of time to avoid any abrupt changes for services, those who are supported by them, as well as those working in them. And finally, the BCC may need your support in actually implementing the outcomes that are arrived at. Yeah, we're all part of the fabric of Orville's budget. So yeah, we hope you'll join us. All right. So with that, we'll move to the focus of today's presentation, which is a presentation of the report of the last financial year, which ran from April 2020 to March 2021, for those of you who are not familiar. So as I mentioned, this report was prepared by myself and Avinash, who is a fellow Orvillian and a resource person for BCC, with the feedback of many community members. So we thought this would be a really good place to start our community budgeting process, as it gives you the overview of the community budget over a full year. This presentation is available online as a website, which you can view anytime in the comfort of your own home, or maybe even I'd like to invite you to look at it with your teams, look at it together, and yeah, bring it into your workplaces. So the URL is budget.orville.org.in. So the idea for such a budget actually cropped up in both of our heads at the same time, as these ideas tend to do. And somehow we ended up talking about it, and somehow we ended up actually both being willing to dedicate time going forward to make it happen. We then brought it to the wider BCC team, who also supported this initiative, and so here we are today, about 6 months later. Just to say that during this process, we received support from the Sci-Hub team at CSR, as well as from Vasant, I'm not sure if he's here today, who's a programmer at UVabe, and who's also now helping us to take this project forward in new and exciting ways. So our intention is really to raise awareness in our community about how our collective funds are generated and shared, so we can all enter into a much more conscious and engaged relationship with how we participate in serving this community. So with that, I'd like to invite us all to just pause and find a moment of quiet, maybe even close your eyes if that serves you, and just connect to a space of just real open mind, curiosity, and receptivity, so that we're able to absorb more than just facts and figures as we enter into this presentation.
Hi everyone, my name is Avinash, for those who don't know, which is probably most of you. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay, sorry. Well, my name is Avinash. Yeah, let's just maybe get started. So let's begin by getting a picture of the overall contributions, disbursements and reserves in 2021. The overall contributions to city services was 2,170 lakhs. These contributions came from both within and beyond the community. Last year, internal contributions were close to 90% of the total contributions to city services. This represents 6.1% of the total income generated by Orville in 2021. When I say 2021, I mean fiscal year 2020-2021. Internal contributions were 12.2% lower than the previous year due to the impact of COVID. This is not an accurate representation of the reduction in income generated in our community, because we also received pending contributions from previous years. So the reduction in income generated is actually more significant than 12.2%. External contributions were 10.6% of the income to city services, and this was 253% higher than the previous year due to the increased economic relief contributions during that first COVID year. So in regular years, the external contributions to city services are generally lower than 10% of the overall. We'd like to take a moment here to thank all of those who contributed to Orville from within and beyond the community during this difficult time. Yeah. Let's now look at the contributions per source in a bit more detail. The highest contributors were Auroville's commercial units and activities, coming in at 37% of the total, or 802 lakhs. Next were returns on the investments of Auroville funds by the financial services. We then have individual monthly contributions made by Aurovillians, newcomers, and volunteers, as well as extra donations from community members. Then we have the external contributions. Out of this, 64% was a part of the GOI grant for SIRE, 24% were other Indian contributions, and 12% were foreign contributions. Auroville as a whole receives significant other external donations, but these are specified to particular projects, infrastructure, or services, and not channeled through city services.
Which the yellow line intersects the purple line, that is the beginning of the financial year 2021. So we started the financial year 2021 with reserves of 620 lakh, which was 5.8 months of buffer at the budgetary rate of 2021, although that rate was significantly reduced because of COVID, because we managed disbursements during that period. So as you can see, if you look at the chart, yeah, if you can just draw, yeah. So for the major part of the year, the reserves were maintained fairly evenly until the end, in which there was that sudden spike at the very end of the financial year. You can see that's March, from February to March. So just want to explain that this is because we had an influx of unexpected pending contributions that came in right in that month. We also had the GOI grant that had been really delayed in 2021 that came in right at the end. So yeah, so we had all of a sudden a big spike. For the rest of the year, that even maintaining was actually achieved by projecting income month to month. So we were getting our income figures every month and adjusting projected disbursements against those because there was so much economic uncertainty. So we were just trying to manage month to month. I personally was quite impressed at the end of the year figures, seeing how well that was done. Because if you look at the internal income, it was reduced by 12.2%, whereas the disbursements were reduced by 13.1%. So we're looking at a less than 10% margin of error, so to speak. But that said, I'm even more impressed with that sudden spike, all of the influx of funds that we got at the end of the year that actually made us end this financial year, this COVID year, with the highest reserves that City Services has ever had. Yeah, you can laugh, it's quite incredible. At the same time, I want to say that we're grateful for these extra reserves because actually the full financial impact of COVID, we're only going to really see next year because of the way that we collect contributions, which are based on the previous year cycle. So we're still not out of the woods in terms of really understanding what the economic impact is. So it's not a bad thing that we've got reserves at this stage. And if you can just show the 1920 page. So basically to understand how these figures actually compare with 1920, which would have been a so-called normal year, and then 2021, a totally abnormal year, we created a whole separate page. It's up there, comparison with financial year 1920. We won't go through this today, but if you're curious and you're wanting to really kind of look at these trends and what changed, you can check out that page in more detail. Okay. So we'll now get into the sectors. Yeah, and I'll hand it over to Avinash.
Okay, so let's get into the sectors. As we get into the sectors, you'll see that we have followed a basic template in order to present our data in what we hope is an accessible way. You will see the annual disbursements towards that sector and what percentage of the total disbursements it is. And then we answer three questions. How many services, how many people serving, and who is served in each sector. There will be variations in the way we show data in each sector based on what seemed most appropriate for each. Please note that there are many other units, services, and projects that are active in these sectors. Our report only covers those supported by City Services, but we hope that an overarching presentation can be developed in the future. So, education. Oroville's education budget supports the youth within the community and surrounding villages, as well as continuing education for adults, attempting to manifest the community's founding ideal of being a place of unending education. It is the biggest sector by disbursements, with 509 lakhs disbursed, accounting for 24% of the disbursed budget. That's almost a quarter. We have combined Oroville schools and outreach schools, as well as the admin and adult educational services within this sector. You want to scroll down to the service? So examples of these are like in education centers, we have Udavi, Last School, Transition School, IKM. For admin and support, we have the SIRE Administration or Teacher Center, and in other services, we have Savitri Bhavan and the library, for example. Right? All this totals to 37 different services. There are 3,424 students being served at the educational centers. There are also 9 apprenticeship maintenances given from City Services. In total, there are 631 people serving in this sector, 520 of which are supported by City Services. Let's go to the next one. So, the next biggest sector by disbursements was the social support sector, which accounted for 18.7% of last year's disbursements. This covers various forms of financial support that are available to community members. These are children's maintenances available to all children of Oroville whose families could do with the extra financial support. Children's nutrition budget that pays for the lunches of students in Oroville schools. Personal and social support maintenances that are granted to Orovillians with health issues that limit their ability to work, or to those who are over 65 and have been living and working in Oroville for a long time. Aside from these maintenances, there is also a personal emergency fund that provides one-time support for Orovillians in financial difficulty for expenses such as visa or passport fees. There's also a bridging maintenance for those who are transitioning between workplaces, maternity maintenances for mothers during pregnancy and postpartum, temporary emergency maintenances that was actually created in the last financial year for those Orovillians working in units or services that could no longer support them during the financially difficult period last year. And finally, another category of support for those who offer their time in multiple services and so do not receive maintenances from any one, shown here in the other activities Oroville. In total, 405 lakhs were dispersed through these different means, which is equivalent to 211 adult full-time maintenances. In the last financial year, the allocations in this sector increased by 30.5% due to the economically precarious situation. We'd like to close on this with a quote from the mother, although we admit we're not there yet. The organization should be so arranged that the material needs of everyone are assured, not according to the ideas of rights and equality, but on the basis of the minimum needs. And once that is established, each one should be free to organize his life not according to his financial means, but his inner capacities. Many services have emerged to meet the basic needs of Orovillians, such as PTDC and Nandini, often referred to as the prosperity services. There is also a range of municipal services that meet the needs of the township as a whole, such as the road service, eco service, puncture service, etc. In total, there are 177 people serving in 18 services in this sector, serving not only Orovillians and newcomers, but also volunteers and guests. Yeah, we just thought that quote was funny, but yeah. Anyway. The health sector accounted for 6.4% of the total budget, with 139 lakhs dispersed. There are 114 people serving in this sector, 81 of whom are supported by city services. Those served are, of course, the Oroville community and the bioregion at large, but it wasn't possible to arrive at one number for those served in this sector. And so you can see a description here just to give you a sense of how much good work these services are doing. Services in this sector include Sante, Health Center, Integrated Animal Care, Dental Center, etc. You can see a full list there. Forest. Right. This budget goes to the forest group, whose main objectives are to increase the forest cover, protect water tables, protect the land, and maintain the existing forests, work which has been going on since the very beginning of Oroville. The forest sector saw 126 lakhs dispersed towards it, accounting for 5.8% of the annual budget. There are 46 communities and one nursery and herbarium in this budget. The budget for the forests are distributed directly to the forest group that shares among the different forest communities as required. In total, there are over 130 people serving, and those served include the Oroville community and its visitors, local plant and animal species, as well as practitioners of traditional medicine and scientists and students of botany and zoology. As we all should know, the Oroville community is self-organized and appoints a range of groups to take care of various aspects of the organization of community life and development. In this organization sector, we have Oroville's administrative bodies and working groups such as the RAS, the TDC, SAVI, the BCC, etc., totaling 13. Over 43 people work in this sector, many of whom volunteer their time while being engaged in other Oroville activities. They serve the whole Oroville community, Orovillians, newcomers, volunteers, guests, and Oroville entities like units and services. A total of 101 lakhs was dispersed in this sector, accounting for about 4.6% of the budget. This chart here shows the distribution of the budget in this sector, and you can see how much was dispersed exactly by hovering over it. And now I'm going to hand it over to Miah. Take it from here.
Thank you. Yeah, just to say, when you saw me hover on that pie chart earlier, so when you're checking out this website at home, like there are a lot of interactive features, and actually even on some of the charts, there are drill downs. So if you go to the top right corner of the chart and you click, you might get several other layers of data. So you can play with that at home. Arts, culture, and sports. So in A Dream, the mother envisions that, quote, beauty in all its artistic forms, painting, sculpture, music, literature, would be equally accessible to all. The ability to share in the joy it brings would be limited only by the capacities of each one and not by social or financial position. She also shared that physical culture is the best way of developing the consciousness of the body, and the more the body is conscious, the more it is capable of receiving the divine forces that are at work to transform it. So Oroville has a proliferation of artistic expression and a strong ethos of physical education, and our community, of course, regularly gathers for cultural events and celebrations. And such activities fall within the arts, culture, and sports sector that received 72 lakhs in the last financial year, accounting for 3% of the budget. So there's budgetary support for artistic performances by Orovillian and visiting artists in Oroville venues. Centers for physical education, such as La Piscine swimming pool, the Pitanga Center, and community sports grounds in Certitude, Aspiration, and New Creation are also communally supported facilities. There is a budget for community celebrations, such as gatherings at the Matrimandir at the occasion of Oroville's birthday, cultural celebrations such as Deepavali, and events at the youth center. Budgets in the sector support 18 services, with a total of 80 people serving within them, including 61 supported by city services in 2021. Supported to share Oroville's artistic, cultural, and physical education and performance with not only Orovillians, newcomers, volunteers, and guests, but also members of the surrounding population of all ages, with free artistic and cultural events, as well as sports facilities. Farms. So farming in Oroville is supported by a budget allocated via the Farm Group to Oroville Farms and FoodLink, which is a central collection and distribution service for Oroville's farm produce. The Farm Group is made up of Oroville's farmers and is responsible for the stewardship of approximately 372 acres of land farmed by Orovillians in 21 farms. Its goal is to create and maintain a healthy and conscious farming system, integrated with and providing as much food as possible for Oroville, while taking into consideration the needs and best interests of both the land and the Oroville community. A total of 59 lakhs was dispersed to farm sector last financial year, accounting for 3% of the budget. As with forests, although there are 22 services, disbursements are made directly to the Farm Group that shares their budget internally between the different farms. There are over 120 people serving in the sector, about 45 Orovillians, 75 employed, and many volunteering. The sector, of course, serves the whole Oroville community, either directly to residents or through our community kitchens, restaurants, and outlets. Oroville's outreach budget supports 8 services in sharing and communicating the life and development of Oroville within the community and beyond. So we know the term outreach is often used for village outreach activities, but in this report, those are merged into the sector of activity they fall under. basically all of them in education and health. So our so-called outreach sector includes 8 services, such as Orville Radio, who is live streaming this event, thank you, the Visitor Center, the Guest Registration Group, and has a total of 50 people serving in it, 40 of which are supported by city services. 50 lakhs were dispersed to the sector, making up 2% of the budget. It's important to note that a large portion of this is actually generated by the sector itself. For example, the visitor center parking income all gets collected by city services. As for who is served, we couldn't give you one number because it's a mix of online and in-person. So we have various metrics for each of these services. So for example, visitor center parking typically receives 800,000 people per year, while Orville Radio's content is accessed by about 50,000 people. So we encourage you to take a look at that section over there to look into that in more detail when you have time, if you're interested. Land. So land is the second largest asset of Orville after human resources. This was the description offered to us by Helena from the land board, and we thought it was so beautifully put. So Orville land is not only dear, but actually sacred to many of us. And it's under the care of the land board, whose functioning is provided for by the Orville City Services budget. So the main goal of the land board is to procure land for Orville and to protect existing land. So the land sector consists of 2 services, the land board and the Lands for Orville Unified Fundraising Team. The sector accounts for 2% of the dispersed budget with a total of 36 lakhs. These funds are not actually used towards land purchase. These go towards human resources and administrative expenses of the sector. In total, 36 people are serving the sector, 28 of whom are supported by city services. So Matra Mandir, as many of you know, is known as the soul of Orville and intended as a place for trying to find one's consciousness. The Matra Mandir and Park of Unity are open for Orvillians, newcomers, guests, visitors, for silent concentration, but also for collective gatherings, such as meditations for Orville's birthday and other concerts and plays throughout the year. The budget from city services is just over 1% of last year's disbursements, coming in at 23 lakh. And these funds support the close to 170 people, Orvillians and employees, working here, in part. Just to note that Matra Mandir receives significant additional funds from individual donors and also the support of many other people who volunteer there. Housing. So last year, the housing sector saw 17.5 lakh dispersed from CS, accounting for 1% of the budget. Usually, there would be more funds allocated towards housing repairs, but this was reduced in that year due to the COVID budget restrictions. So again, the city services funding does not go into the actual construction of housing, just like in land, but to actually support the administration of the services in the sector, as well as housing repairs. So Housing Service, Housing Board, and Kailash are the 3 services supported in this sector. There are 16 people serving here. And yeah, Orvillians, newcomers, youth, volunteers are all people who are served through these services. So thank you for listening. That was all of the sectors. We really want to end by saying that, of course, facts and figures cannot capture the care, the dedication, the time, the aspirations, and the impact of all those who are contributing to the dream of Orville. And as we said, there are so many other units, services, projects that don't fall within the city services budget. Regarding our facts and figures, we did our best to collect the most accurate that we could. We used city services records, and we also connected a lot of the services directly to check in with them. We also used information that was shared from their narrative reports, so a lot of the language here actually comes from the reports of the sectors themselves. So we hope that you'll spend more time on this website. that it contributes to a culture of transparency and accountability in our community, and that basically it serves as an effective and meaningful educational resource. So please share it with your friends, share it with your colleagues, share it with your coworkers. Tell them what you learned. Once again, I want to repeat the intention we shared at the very beginning, which is that, our intention is really to raise awareness in our community about how our collective funds are generated and shared, so that we can all enter into a more conscious and engaged relationship with how we participate in serving this community. Thank you. So we went a lot faster than we thought we would. I hope we weren't speaking too fast. So we're gonna, we have some time. We're gonna open up for questions. Mahi, would you help me take names? Thank you. So I'm just going to start by opening just for questions really specifically on the presentations. I realize people here might have wider questions about BCC, but let's first just start with questions on the presentations you just heard. Kripa, can you give her the mic, Avinash? That second mic under you. Or you can come up here. Just before we start, can I invite the BCC members in the room to just sit here so we can all participate in answering, and everyone knows who you are. Ratinam, I can see you. Inge, Enrika, Orosugan, Mahi, Matan. Thank you. Hans. Actually, I'm going to pass the mic around so that everyone can just introduce themselves and you can hear their voice.
My name is Ratnam. I work in the Unity Fund and member of BCC. Anything more? That's all. Thank you.
I'm Enrica, and I'm member of BCC, and I work also in BCC office, specifically in BCC Care, who is taking care of the maintenance and the contribution and lunch schemes, this kind of stuff. Thank you.
Good evening to all. Welcome. So my name is Orosugan. I'm part of the BCC, and I'm also part of the Sante coordination. I think I'll be talking to a lot of you about the COVID. Yeah, thank you.
I'm Hans, representing the Green Group in the BCC, so the Farm Group and the Forest Group. I'm doing this for 3 years now. I must say that I would have been very happy if I would have had something like this when we started. I find it like really, because when I started 3 years ago, I seriously had no idea. So, and it took quite a while before I had an idea. After 3 years, I know something, I think.
My name is Inge. I'm since 4 or 5 years now in the BCC. I am mostly now focusing on budgeting for the next year.
Hello everyone, my name is Madan. I'm with the BCC since June 2021. I'm also taking care of the general administration in the BCC office. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mahi. I also work at Transition School. I'm a BCC member since 2019, I think. Yeah. You might see me on the road on a horse.
Yeah, so I could add that I've also been a BC member since June of last year, so coming close to 2 years now. And otherwise, I'm active in research. I run a service called the Research Platform here in Oroville. I do a lot around community processes, and in BCC I do a lot of, the communications and this kind of community process work. Kripa.
No, just a very practical question on your presentation. On your page on housing, you talk about 3 projects, and one of them is Kailash. Apart from getting half a maintenance, we don't get any support from the BCC. So I was wondering how we enter your chart and how that was considered.
Yeah, so basically any service that receives any amount of support from city services is obviously accounted for in city service, so it enters into our report. It's that simple. There's no minimum threshold of support that you receive that makes you eligible to enter into the report. So if you receive any funds from CS, you're in our report, you're in our figures.
Okay, no, because as it comes under housing, one gets the impression that we're getting some kind of support linked to housing. And it's a half maintenance that's being given. It's not linked at all with any support with the building or the housing as such, because it's misleading, I find.
So if you...
Yeah, and it's educational, yeah.
So when I was presenting, I was explaining that the budget that goes into the housing sector goes towards human resources and administrative expenses primarily. That's true for the housing service, it's true for the housing board. There is usually an additional house repairs budget that gets channeled through housing service. In 2021, exceptionally, that was lower, but otherwise it's just HR and administration.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Well, we have shown the disbursements in each sector, in each service in other sectors, so we could do something similar here, taking this feedback on, and then people will know exactly how much went in.
So I think, Kripa, what Avinash is asking you is, do you want to see on every single page exactly how much money goes to every single service? Or anyone else here?
No, I don't know. Actually, it's just that I'm concerned by Kailash and I'm concerned by this. And when I see this, I'm like, how do we fit into this? So I don't know. I think this presentation is great and it gives us a good overview. But because this concerns my sector of work particularly, I don't feel like it. But once you clarify saying it's clearly about maintenances and administration, then it works. But under the heading of housing like this, it gives me the wrong impression, that's all. So I don't know if generally others feel the need or not. I just felt like clarifying this bit.
And so since Fabien is on our team and on Kailash, we obviously just asked him. So we had that discussion with him regarding Kailash rather than you or the other people there.
Yeah, we are.
Move on.
We also have an about an FAQ page on this website that explains more. We didn't present on that here, but there is more. There is some explanation of that.
Right.
And as we receive more feedback, we're happy to incorporate into it as well.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah.
So Mahi's taking names. Avinash, you can just follow her.
So you could explain a little bit what is the process that you follow to allocate funds to projects that come to this presentation. It will be interesting to see, for them to know why some of them get that much and when some of them get less. What is your process of inquiry? What is your, how you check that this request is genuine? And when you disburse, how are the mechanisms that you have to ensure that the money allocated is actually utilized properly? So these two questions I would like to ask. Thank you.
You want to take it?
Sorry, I wasn't actually listening properly to the question.
I think I can answer a little bit. First of it, there's a lot of history in this budget. So that means like the moment you start like being part of the BCC, you actually, there's already a budget, thankfully. So that is one thing. There's a lot of history. Then there's a lot of requests that are coming, which actually makes us look at how is it actually, it makes us aware about like what is actually going where. So that is the second thing. Another thing is, and that is an exercise in which we are doing now, and that's also why we are here, we are asking the different sectors to tell us what is your budget request, what do you actually need, how many maintenances do you need, how many budget do you need, etc. So that gives a lot of information. 2 years ago we asked all the services, what would you ideally need? What would you really, if we could give you anything that you need? So that's actually, that gave a lot of nice information. So this is basically how, in a nutshell, I think, requests, a yearly request in which everybody has to say, and the history. Does it answer a little bit?
Yeah, but I would say I think the intention of this gathering is to create awareness how we manage our city services budget. So I think this is an attempt, I think, to be more participatory. We have requests coming from all the sectors, but the BCC is the only body that actually takes the final decision, and I'm not saying you're doing a bad job, but I think it would be good that this becomes more open. Then everybody participates and said, okay, we believe that this budget requires more or less, and there is a better discussions about what are the priorities of our community, what are the sectors that actually need to be strengthened, what are the sectors that are actually doing well, and so that is more or less what I think is intention, if I'm correct.
I think you came late because I described the whole participatory budgeting process and all of those questions. So I think everyone here has heard it.
Who's next? Praveen. Who's next?
Thank you. I think that was a very useful and a very structured presentation. I just had a slightly different curiosity. So you have an annual disbursement and income of, say, about 20 crores, and you roughly disburse about 20 crores. I was just curious that you must be receiving a lot of requests, like Hans said, about. So ideally, like, your disbursements, in a sense, are constrained by your resources. If you were to look at reasonable requests that you're receiving, what would be the size of the city services budget? Like, in the ballpark, would you need something like 25 crores or 40 crores to be able to do justice to reasonable requests, if you have some idea of that number?
So I'm relatively new. I think I just joined 20 in the 20. But to answer your question, I think like what as Mark asked, I think we have a criteria. Like for example, they were talking about the major cost goes into the maintenance or the recurring expense and the non-recurring expense. So we by historically have some kind of a base. Like for example, a monthly about a 44 lakhs is for a recurring expense. So that is what we have in our hand. And similarly for maintenance, as we said, I think there was an exercise that was done 2 years ago. And for farm group, like there is allocated about 40 maintenance that they requested. So that is the base that we use to allocate the maintenance. If there is any kind of a new request for a maintenance, again that comes from that group, and then we meet the group to see if there is necessary, and then we take a decision to increase the maintenance of that. Then we go to a process, we ask the FMC for approval to increase the maintenance. So that is it. To answer your question about where we need to go, I think that is the base that we are doing it now. So we are going to increase the recurring or the non-recurring expense, and we need, like for the health needs, a big boost if it needs 2% more income. So that we really don't have an idea. I think that is the platform that we are looking now, and that is the reason why we are having this participatory budget, to get that answer, like what amount, where we need to have this. So again, when we look into our income, I think this is only 1 year. So we really can't come what is our internal source income that we generate and what we disperse. But on the further way, we want to put it in a way that we get all the needs that is done, and then look for also resources. I think that is the third question, like where do we get that funds? Like we are going to have a budget, but where do we get that funds? So that is the third question that comes in this budget also. I think so that is.
I would like to add, what I often heard is, I don't need to ask, they will not give. Yeah? If you can take this out of your mind and you give us a real feedback what this community feels to need as a basic, not as a only dreaming to have an aeroplane or whatever. Yeah, but don't hesitate to share with us your needs. It's our duty then to look into, and it is mother's duty to see to fulfill the needs. If they are honestly and truly, she will fill the needs. We have seen it in the budgeting of the Corona year. We started to look only on the expenses and to take really only the needs and really to ask the services, please look what you really need. They did it beautiful. We asked the community, the units, please see what you can share from your reserves, which they did. So what we came up is with an increase. Now, suddenly we have 900 lakhs, you said, huh? Reserves, so-called reserves. Now it's our duty to say what we do with these reserves. We keep it as reserves because we are fear-based, because we think perhaps one day we need reserves of 5 months, or do we have really needs in the community which can be fulfilled without risking our safety and our basic needs? Is it somehow coming? Good.
Ça ne marche pas. No, I wanted to bring some element of answer to Mark, because your question presumes that there is some way of knowing the reality of a need and a way of assessing the usage of the money allocated, for sure. But there is no such system. So we have to work with uncertainties. So I think when I was in the BCC, I think it's still the case today. There is a lot of meeting with people who express their needs. It's not just an email that they send and a budget. There is a process of communication. And this process of communication is extremely important, because this is when, in fact, we have the occasion to circulate the meaning of Auroville among each other. And this circulation of the meaning of Auroville is what keeps things within the frame. There is no exaggeration or misutilization. I think it's the main element. And I always pleaded for more communication, whether with the commercial units or with the services, so that we don't deal only with Excel sheets, and numbers, because that's dehumanizing. Yes. So what about this? Is there in the BCC now a trend to communicate more with people?
Yes, therefore we are sitting here, therefore we are doing this, therefore we are inviting. And yes, I'm focusing the full time of my life in the next few months only to receive you, to talk to you, to fill up forms which are boring, but to listen to you and to feel you, and to communicate this with the other team members, and we see then what is budgeting possible. It's a new way of budgeting. Please pass by in the BCC office, share what you think, what you want to offer to this community, and we will see how we compile it. Miah is great in this. She will just compile it, and then we will see what we can do out of it. We will keep contact with you. We will keep you informed. This came up, this came up, this came up. We keep you in the loop of taking decisions together. This is why we are sitting here and trying something new and see how we can make it.
Hello, Giulietta is my name. Housing That's my question. There's 1% for housing. We don't own the house we live in, so we are stewards of the housing, and there's no budget to repair it. So do you think it has to come from the people's own pocket, like the maintenance, or can there be an increase in the housing repair section? That is my request, because I think that is really, really low.
The 1% for housing is very, very low, because during the year that we were, the numbers of this year, actually what we did was dumping down those numbers. The housing was really, we didn't do anything on housing repair. So last year. So the 1% really does not show anything. But it must be, one thing must be very clear, is like even if it would be a normal year, this is just repair what we are talking about. So not the value of the housing, no construction and etc. Just repair. So the 1% does not give a real feel. So you have to speak out with the radio.
When you go to the housing, when anybody goes to the housing, they said, my pocket is empty, I cannot repair your house. And I think there are quite some requests for housing repair. So my concern would be to raise that housing repair pot.
Yeah, we have the lucky situation now that we are sitting next to the housing. We are sharing one office, so we see you coming in and we hear you and we see, oh. Huh? So before we were on the second floor floating, now we are on the ground and we see reality. We are in close contact with a new housing board, we are in close contact with the housing service, we are trying to see the needs. They just came yesterday again because they also have to fill up their budget request form, and I told them, please, you put reality. And please don't forget you have how many houses. And they will see now what they really need. The aim is that it is not going on the Aurovilians who has already to build the house from their pocket, also to repair the house from their pocket, because in the end it is not yours, it's the asset of Auroville. We have to repair and to maintain. Perhaps we don't have all the funds in this year, perhaps you have to, this is something that Soyamai perhaps will say, we phase it in.
So if my memory serves me, and other BC members can correct me, that this year, the housing repair budget, in addition to this, is 36 lakhs. Yeah. So, Giulietta, so already this year, it's already an additional 36 lakhs in this running year. Miah is following the...
I heard a third question from Mark, which I don't think has been totally addressed, so I'm going to put it again, rather pithily. How do you ensure value for money? Means once you've decided that a budget request is reasonable and you disperse it, is there a follow-up to how that service is performing and delivering and so on? Because are they reporting back? Personally, I feel this could be a little bit increased or, whatever, improved.
I can start by answering that question, and then you guys can go next. So I would say the first thing is this exercise that we did right here. So what's never been shown before is the actual so-called beneficiaries. So this is the first time that we are actually showing this. Now, there is reporting that happens from all the services that receive a budget. They submit a narrative report every single year. And in those reports, BCC is able to read how many people were served, what kinds of services were provided, what were the challenges of that service during the year. And those narrative reports are read in all of our budgeting processes. And for the first time, we're doing this broader communication exercise, and we're actually showing that more narrative content here. And so this raises really collective and community awareness about how services that are supported by the BCC are serving the wider community. So it really puts that out there in the open. Another thing is historically, Stephanie, she's not here anymore, but when she joined the BCC, she started a BCC review section which was being run by her and up until recently by Nilen. And this was the first time that in the BCC office there was actually a review of the expenses of the services. So to put it really simply, if someone had gotten a budget, to pay for dog food, let's say integrated animal care, someone checked and saw and looked, oh, did they actually spend this on dog food? Or did they buy, ice cream at Tanto? So that level was done. I think, though, that there is scope for a much more meaningful form of review, which is not just around how every rupee in Paisa is accounted for. I mean, I think it's good that it's there, but I think that if I can make that claim, I think that most of us would care more about how these services are actually serving the wider community, like this actual impact and human level. We published a couple of times already saying that there is space for one more BCC member, and that we, within our team, had identified that a new member could most meaningfully contribute if they would be willing to take up that role. And that is probably a full-time job. So if anyone here or anyone you know is interested and really has the skills in communicating with services, talking, has probably management skills themselves, has done management in terms of how to, reach more people, how to be more efficient, and all of those aspects in terms of management, then that would be a great candidate for this role. And in the meantime, this team is just going to continue to do the best that we can with the human resources that we have.
Thank you for the very complete and beautiful presentation. I have two questions. One is, if we open up the community interactions, obviously there could be more awareness, learning for everyone, and perhaps you will be able to you will really receive a lot more requests for the budget. And do you have some strategies to grow the budget, to grow the funding so that the pie gets bigger, and before it is divided by sector to meet the increase in requests? The second question is, I would like personally to see the budget that funds experiments in Oroville where there are newcomers, Orovillians, youth that feel inside themselves what they like to do, would like to really do and contribute in this month, in this year, not exactly restricting themselves or dedicate to one sector as such, but to see how life guides them. So in that way, perhaps they will grow more integrally. Will there be a budget for such kind of people and experiments? Because I have heard instances where people work in a unit, in a place, and because of the maintenance or something, they stay on in that role, while inside of them they may have already wanted to move on to do something else. So could there be budget support for that integral development and the contribution for a flow, which is, I feel, much needed for the future that is very much changing?
So there was a question on the income and on this part. Inga, do you want to?
I cannot reply how to increase the pie, but I know it will increase as per the needs. But there are other people who knows it better. I can tell you, fill up the form. Whoever feels, I would like to try this, fill up the new form. It's in the AutoNet. We can put it tomorrow again in the AutoNet so that you have access to it. Fill it up, give it a chance, put your full heart in, and you will see what comes. This is the only thing what I can tell you. Yeah? Never stay somewhere where your heart is no longer jumping and joyful. You will block yourself and you will block the full community just for money. I hope we are not here for this. I hope we can make a step.
I think just to add to the first question about the increasing the pie, I think that is the thing that we're talking about, the reserves. So reserves is the base that we have, but we always feel if we have a good intention and good thing, the pie will increase. If we have a good intention to work, Her Grace will give that money. So that money is not just to stand as a reserve. So if we have to do something beautiful, that will come. That is what our feeling is. So that is why we are looking for this increase. But whenever we look, when we look into new requests and things, we always have in mind that we have a reserve that we don't go. We don't just give everything. We have something in base so that we can give it out. So I think that just to add what Inge said.
So the first question about growing the pie, that is also one of the questions of the community budgeting process, is how the income to the city services should come. Because right now, city services gets, you saw on the presentation the sources of income. So we don't know how to make it grow more, except for the goodwill of the various contributors, including people. To answer the second question, we, I guess, would have to create a new category of maintenances for people who are exploring different types of work. If there are currently people participating in working in different sectors, in different services part-time, for that we have the section, I think it was under social services, called Other Orville Activities. We were, and apprenticeships for youth. We were having, we had ideas about increasing the number of maintenances available within this Other Orville Activities so that more people working, giving all of their time to Orville, but not limited to one workplace, would be able to be supported. Does that kind of answer the question? Cool.
Next is Liliana.
It's working? Yeah. First of all, I want to thank all of you, because what's happened today here is something which never happened before. It's really wow, bravi. And I hope all the other group will follow your process. Because, for example, it's 30 years I'm here, but for me the BCC was always something there. Like also the FMC, I don't know. We are not, you are quite, we are doing our job, they are doing their job, but there is not a link between us. Oh, that is very important. It's something, finally. Thank you. Really, thank you. What I want to ask, for example, now I stopped because during the COVID for us was really, really hard to survive. We managed, and we did, and I stopped to give contribution to the school. I would like to ask to you, I don't know the situation, the real situation of the school. Instead of giving maybe something to every school, there is some school who is more in needed than the other one, and maybe you can you can say to us to who is more in need, more the contribution. That's, I can ask that, I can come and ask to you. Huh? Normally I give a small amount to all the school, no? Then, because I don't know if there is some school who is more needed than the other one, and maybe you can address the story. Huh? Anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, so. Okay, you wanted to know how to help the different schools better, right? Or if there are any schools that need more than other schools. I think on average, the BCC budget covers roughly 50 to 70% of the budgets of the different schools. So I think the schools are very grateful to whatever you give little bit to all of them. That's for the Oroville schools. I think outreach schools get a much smaller amount of budget, but they get a lot of funding from outside, including school fees that they charge. Or big donors. I think Udavi has some really big donors. It could also, the donations could go either to all the different schools. Many of them really need it. Or alternately, it could come to BCC and we could distribute it. Now we're going to review very soon the requests that are still coming in from all of the different services, including schools, and see how we can increase budgets accordingly, or decrease if some services happen to need less. Does that kind of answer the question? Next.
Thank you. My name is Danya. Again, thank you so much for this work. What comes to mind for me is that by taking all this data, structuring and presenting it as you did, you allow us to actually understand what's happening. You allow for inclusivity and transparency and building trust. And I think these are very important needs at the moment in the community. The other thing I want to say is because you do this type of work, there's an ability for us common citizens to learn and to think and to plan for the future together. So thank you very much again. I have a few specific questions. One is, I don't think I saw in the budget anything about research, development, and innovation. I assume there's a lot of research that goes on in all the sectors. And it will be very hard to quantify it. But so one of the questions is there an effort to quantify the actual research that's going on in all the different sectors? Second, can we actually set up some platform, and I know Surya Marie and Henrika already working with that, where we have a common sort of like pot for research, development, innovation that can also actually boost the economy. That means in social entrepreneurship and so on. We suddenly have a windfall of 300 lakhs. I mean, what can we do with that in terms of boosting the economy based on the right value system that we adhere to? I would love to see some brainstorming around that if that is possible. The other thing is there's a lot of data that is floating around in the different working groups. That there's a lot of fragmented data and there's not enough institutional memory in Oroville across all the different parts of Oroville. Is there a way to bring that together with a budget? Again, that will help us to also become more educated and integrated as a community. And at the same time, maybe also save money in certain aspects of our operations and put that to good use somewhere else. Thank you.
So I can answer that, and then if anyone wants to add. So SIRE grants, SIRE has a lot of grants for research. So actually there is a large funding source for research specifically through SIRE, and people can apply directly there for research grants. There's also PCG, which also has research grants. So there are a lot of other funding sources for research specifically. And we do have communications with these entities. For example, where PCG or increasingly SIRE will have had something that started out as a project and that now has been, carrying on over 2 or 3 years. They're saying, oh, actually now this is turning into a service. Is this something that now City Services is able to take up? So those conversations are ones that we have. But where it's really just new research, those are the key funding sources, because those also have people who are specialized in actually dealing with these requests. In terms of your suggestion for actually having a service that brings data together, I mean, I would say all suggestions are great. BCC relies on individual community members coming forward with proposal for services that do this. And then, yes, of course, we'll look and see what budget can be provided. But we can't set up all the services. So it's really just about each and every one of us where we see that there's a gap and a need in the community to, you know, pen that down, bring it forward, find people who are willing to work on it. Yeah. I don't know if anyone wants to add anything to that. Oh, CSR also, sorry. I'm a social scientist, so it's my... But there's also obviously the Center for Scientific Research that also gets grants for research and funds that.
All right. Hi, Sasha here. Yes, thank you so much. My questions, one was that I saw that the farm, the donations to the farm was really quite low down under sports and culture and many other things. And it kind of surprised me because I've always got this idea and I always hear that the farms in Orville are struggling. And when it comes to the farms, it's food. It's one of our essential needs. So I just wondered, is that budget because that's what they need and that's okay with them, or? So that was one. And my other one wasn't really a question, it was more a reflection of Ananda said here, and I think it would be wonderful to have goals, I guess, you know, the goal would be that our maintenance in Orville is not connected to a job. Yeah, that our basic needs within our community are there, and the chance to explore, that would be a goal.
So one thing about the farms, of course, is that the farms also have income, which is basically not reflected there. So it's not just that number. For the rest, farms are struggling. It's clear. The farm sector in Orville is struggling. And definitely, one of the reasons why we are here, if we think as a community that it is very important to give more money to the farms, then actually that could be an outcome of this meeting. So that's basically my very short answer about that. The other question, what was that?
Was it a question?
It wasn't a question? Thank you. Thank you.
I just want to reply to the no question. Basic income for everybody would be, yeah. We see how we can reach it. We see how we can make it. I think this is the basic idea of Orville. But how to make it and how not to fall back in our fear structure and say, oh, we need a job to find our means. Let's work on it. Let's go in the direction. At least we have now children maintenances for all the childs. This we have, and we have already for the elders. The basic needs is covered. If you are elder in Orville and you are here for a lot of years, please step forward, ask for help if you need help. The middle age, how we can cover this now. This is part of this budgeting. Yeah, this is part of this. Huh? If you say, I want to have a maintenance, I want to be in 15 places, yeah, 1 hour every day or whatever, share it. Yeah? Or if you have 2 places or 3 places, we will see how we can make the structure. If it is a service given to the community, we have to find the tools. If it ends up in basic income or not, I have no idea, but this would be close to my heart. And Suyamais.
I just want to add one small thing on farms, which is that last year, even during this 2021 year, where actually we were really managing expenses, we had started a process with the farm group coordination team at the time to really look at how we could increase support for farms. So this is already something that's been ongoing. And it's actually one of the only budgets that was increased during the 2021 year. We increased maintenances, whereas we had frozen the 1920 level budgets for all of 2021. So if you read our previous reports, you'll see more about that. Also with the lockdown, we had subsidized the food that wasn't able to be distributed because of closure of Solar Kitchen, PTDC Kitchen, and the lockdown. So just to say that we're aware, and this is something that we had begun engaging with the farm group coordination team with to see what could be established, and also really to open up the conversation completely and talk about what could, if there is a better budget structure for farms, what could that be? But it's actually a fairly complex topic, we found out. Lisa, right? And I think that'll be the last question.
Actually, it's not a question. I am Lisa. It's a request. Thank you very much for this work already. And just for my understanding, to go a bit further, could it be possible to know what is the part of the money you give to the services? For example, I know education school receives some finance from your side, but also from SIRE. And I don't know the percentage. I don't know what are the other resources. Like in the farm, you say there are some incomes. And I just want to know what is the percentage of this, if it's possible. Not for today, of course.
So I will attempt to answer. So yeah, it's definitely possible, but so we need to compartmentalize these different data sources. So now if you're looking at the education sector specifically, then we can begin to look at what is the information required and what is the information that is valuable to the community. And so feedback like this is very important to try and understand how we look for data as well. Right now, data is quite scattered in our community. So yeah, this itself took a lot of time, and BCC already had a lot of the data, right? So yeah, so definitely that's something that that is definitely very possible. And in this case, it would definitely be something that maybe we can't incorporate in this year's report, but in following reports, depending on the amount of work, for sure.
Yeah, and just to say that why I asked Avinash to answer is this is something that two of us really looked into when we were starting to look at the data and look at this report. And in the BCC budget requests, when people request something, they are required to list their other sources of income for the previous year. However, we had an incomplete data set, so that was one issue that we have, so we wouldn't have been able to provide it uniformly for all of these. But going forward, with this program I mentioned, Vasant, we're looking at how we can collect that more easily. And I'm sorry to end on this note, but we also had an issue with some sectors who actually were not willing or comfortable for us to share their other sources of income on this website. So there's also those things that we need to look into as a community. Okay, last question.
Thank you. No, I come more from the angle of the income, because I mean we've talked actually quite a lot of the questions were on what we could do with the money, what the community would need, what type of support, in which direction we want to go with support for the community at large and the specific sectors. Yeah, I think Liliana and I are basically yet again the only 2 unit holders. Ah no, Mark. So we are, I think, the only 3 unit holders present here, and I think that the very good presentation that you have put together can only, I mean, it needs to be shared, because I think that this is also very important that we reach more towards the income generating sector. I think that I think there's really a wealth of information, and you will get hopefully quite a lot of questions on this presentation, because yeah, it really opens up the reality of what the BCC and the community faces here. One thing I would like to point out is that you have showed us this graph where for basically 10 months of the year, things were sort of bumbling along with basically income and expenditure being rather finely balanced. And then at the 2 last years of that financial year, it sort of shot up by 3 crores. And one of the reasons you gave was that there was actually quite a lot of past contribution pending from previous years that came in. I think it would be actually quite interesting. I mean, I hope BCC knows what that figure is. I think it would be actually really interesting, because if we are talking about transparency, I think it's also good for the community to realize how much that spike is something that can be repeated even in smaller, in lesser quantities. But what are we talking about here? Is this really just a one-off? Because this is now exhausted, and what we need to now rely on is just more what we are able to generate, plus donations hopefully would still be coming from elsewhere.
Yeah, so there's actually quite a simple answer to that question, because in the spike at the end was the GOI grant, and then the pending contribution we're referring to was the large transfer that was made from PTPS as part of the transition over. So there was 1.3 crore that came in March, and that was based on, and that was based on essentially a calculation done between BCC Finance and Kala. Yeah, looking at basically if PTPS had been contributing as a commercial unit for the years in which it was generating significant surplus revenue, what would that amount add up to? And that amount was about 1.3 crore, and that amount was transferred by Kala to city services. But Mahi can speak more about the remaining pending contributions.
Yeah, as out of the BCC members, I'm kind of in charge of the BCC Finance section. There's Shada, who actually sends the emails, but I'm supposed to supervise. I do that marginally well, I don't know. But I know the total pending contributions is somewhere around 2 crore of, or something like that, or maybe more. But a significant amount of that is probably never going to come, because it's from units who are systematically struggling, and the pending amounts, some of them are quite large, and they're pending since, for example, 2013, 2015, so significantly far enough back that people may not be able to contribute. So many of them do, many units do contribute yearly. Whenever we send the requests, a lot of them promptly pay whatever is missing. Many people pay also on time, correctly during the year, and at the end there's almost no balance. So overall, it's coming fairly well, and the contributions are coming correctly. But yeah, there is a significant pending, some of which will probably never be covered.
Okay, thank you all so much for coming, and we hope that you'll come again. We hope to see you on Tuesday. On Tuesday, we'll be having a small table format. So there'll be one table really on the income. There'll be other tables on these various sectors. You'll be sitting with a BCC member and a sector representative and going into much more detail into each of these sectors with people who know about them, both from the budget side and the services side. So if that interests you, please join us next Tuesday, January 11th, 4:30 in this space. It'll be a 2-hour session. Thank you.